I'm Cassandra Mitchell, 32, sitting at our family's mahogany dining table when it happened. My father raised his glass to toast my sister Audrey's latest courtroom victory. To my brilliant daughter, he beamed, who earned everything on her own merit. Then he looked at me smirking. Unlike some people who need handouts, the room fell silent as he laughed. 20 years of suppressed truth bubbled to the surface as I replied, "Actually, Dad, I know what really happened." Their faces drained of color. Some secrets weren't meant to stay buried forever. Before I dive into what happened next, let me know where you're watching from today. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt undervalued by the people who should appreciate you most. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this family drama unfolds. Growing up in the Mitchell household meant one thing was constant. Audrey came first. My sister, 3 years my senior at 35, had always been the golden child. From her straight-A report cards displayed prominently on the refrigerator to her Harvard law degree hanging in our father's study, Audrey's achievements were the standard against which I was perpetually measured and found wanting. Our parents, Richard and Elizabeth Mitchell, never tried to hide their preference. Dad, a prominent corporate attorney himself, saw Audrey as his legacy. Mom, a former debutante turned charity board member, loved showcasing her perfect daughter at Boston society events. I was an afterthought, despite maintaining a 3.9 gigapascals through college and building a successful career in digital marketing that had me on track for an executive position before my 30th birthday. Cassie got lucky with that promotion, my father would say dismissively when I shared career news. Right place, right time. Meanwhile, Audrey's every minor courtroom victory warranted a champagne toast. 6 months ago, I took a leave of absence from my job at Thompson Media Group to help care for my mother following her knee replacement surgery. I moved back to the family home in Brookline temporarily despite knowing what it would do to my mental health. Our 5-bedroom colonial with its manicured lawn and carefully curated interior was less a home and more a stage for maintaining appearances. During my stay, I was reintroduced to my brother-in-law James, who had married Audrey 7 years ago. He seemed perfect on paper, surgeon from a good family, impeccable manners, appropriately deferential to my father. But I'd noticed things over the years, his tight smile when Audrey criticized him, how his eyes would dart away during family discussions of their perfect marriage, the occasional flash of resentment quickly masked by practiced charm. Our family had elevated keeping up appearances to an art form. We were the Mitchells of Brookline, respected, accomplished, enviable. No one needed to know about Dad's explosive temper behind closed doors. Mom's dependency on anxiety medication, or the crushing weight of expectations that had sent me to therapy 3 times a week for the past 2 years. It was during those therapy sessions with Dr. Lowenstein that I began to see the toxicity that had shaped my entire life. Your achievements aren't less valid because they're not acknowledged by your family, she would remind me. But you need to address why their approval still matters so much. I was working on that, truly, when I found it. A folder tucked away in my father's home office where I was searching for Mom's insurance documents. I wasn't snooping intentionally, but what I discovered changed everything. Falsified transcripts, recommendation letters written by people who owed my father favors, financial transactions to university departments coinciding with Audrey's admissions and scholarships. The golden child's achievements weren't earned after all. They were purchased, arranged, manufactured, and that discovery was just the beginning of unraveling the tapestry of lies that was the Mitchell family legacy. As I sat at that fateful dinner watching my father toast Audrey's latest triumph, a high-profile case, she had apparently won through sheer brilliance, something inside me finally snapped. 20 years of diminishment. 20 years of being told I hadn't worked hard enough, wasn't smart enough, didn't deserve enough. All while the family darling had been handed everything on a silver platter meticulously polished by our father to reflect only glory. Audrey caught my eye across the table and smirked secure in her position. She had no idea what I now knew. None of them did. But they were about to find out. The dining room of the Mitchell family home had always been a battlefield disguised as civilized space. That evening was no different, with crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier and the family silver polished to perfection. My mother had prepared Audrey's favorite meal, filet mignon, roasted asparagus, and truffle mashed potatoes to celebrate her latest courtroom victory against a pharmaceutical giant. To my brilliant daughter, Dad repeated his voice carrying the authoritative tone perfected over decades in courtrooms. The finest attorney Boston has seen in a generation. Audrey preened, adjusting her perfectly styled blonde hair. It was a challenging case, but justice prevailed. She launched into a self-congratulatory monologue about her legal strategy, conveniently omitting that her firm had assigned her 3 associates who likely did most of the work. My mother attempted to include me in the conversation. "Cassie, how are things at your company, still doing the internet advertising?" "Digital marketing strategy, Mom. And yes, before my leave, I was leading a team of 12 and handling our 3 largest accounts." Dad scoffed, cutting into his steak. "Playing around on social media all day. Meanwhile, your sister is changing lives through the law, just like real Mitchells have for generations." Richard, Mom murmured. "Cassie works very hard, too. At what posting pictures, Audrey earned everything she has. Full scholarship to Harvard, made partner in record time, married well." He gestured with his fork toward James, who was studying his wine glass with unusual intensity. Cassie, on the other hand, needed strings pulled just to get into Boston University. Always looking for the easy way, always needing help. That's when he laughed and delivered the line that would change everything. "Your sister earned everything on her own, unlike you." The room grew quiet. James shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My mother's eyes darted nervously between my father and me. Audrey's smug smile flickered with uncertainty when she saw my calm expression. "I found the records, Dad," I said, quietly, reaching for my purse beside my chair. "What records?" he barked, but there was a new edge in his voice, something I rarely heard from the great Richard Mitchell. Fear. I removed a folder and placed it on the table. Audrey's college entrance exam. The original one, not the revised score that Harvard received. My sister's face paled. "What are you talking about?" I slid the document across the table. "You scored in the 47th percentile, Audrey. Below average. Certainly not Harvard material. Yet somehow your official score placed you in the top 2% nationally." "This is absurd," my father sputtered, but he didn't open the folder. "Is it because I also found correspondence between you and Dean Wallace about a substantial donation to the law school building fund made the week before Audrey's acceptance?" I turned to my sister. "You didn't earn anything. It was handed to you, bought and paid for." Audrey's composure cracked. "You're making things up because you're jealous. You've always been jealous." My mother reached across the table. "Cassandra, please, this isn't appropriate dinner conversation." "When is it appropriate, Mom?" "When Dad isn't around to hear it, or when Audrey isn't being praised for accomplishments that were fabricated." My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "That's enough. I won't sit here and listen to these baseless accusations from my own daughter, who, may I remind you, is currently living off our charity while taking a break from her insignificant job. I'm on leave to care for Mom, and my position is waiting for me." But nice attempt at deflection. "If you continue with these delusions," Dad threatened, "you can forget about your trust fund. I won't finance this kind of behavior." I laughed for the first time that evening. "I don't need your money, Dad. I've been saving and investing on my own for years. Unlike some people, I actually do earn what I have." My mother was nearly in tears. "Please, Cassie, stop this. Think about the family." "I am thinking about the family, Mom. About the lies we've been living with." Audrey stood up, tossing her napkin onto her half-eaten meal. "This is ridiculous. James, we're leaving." James hesitated, glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it guilt? Recognition? Relief? "This is just the beginning," I said, gathering my things. "I have more, much more. And it's time everyone knew the truth about the illustrious Mitchell family." I walked out of the dining room, my heart pounding, but my step lighter than it had been in years. Behind me, I heard my father's voice, uncharacteristically unsteady. "What have you done?" What had I done? I had finally stood up for myself. And I was just getting started. The path to that confrontational dinner began 3 months earlier on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was helping my mother organize the basement storage, one of many tasks I'd taken on during her recovery, when I came across a dusty banker's box labeled Audrey Education. Inside were the usual mementos, graduation programs, award certificates, photographs of Audrey in her cap and gown. But beneath those in a manila envelope marked confidential, I found documents that didn't align with the family narrative. First was Audrey's original SAT score report, dramatically lower than the score she'd supposedly earned. Next was a series of letters between my father and officials at both her undergraduate university and Harvard Law. The language was careful, circumspect, but the implication was clear: substantial donations in exchange for special consideration of Audrey's application. Most damning was a handwritten note from Dean Wallace. "Richard, consider it done. The committee will see only the revised application materials. The scholarship is arranged as well. Looking forward to the gala next month." I sat on the concrete floor, surrounded by evidence of a lifetime of deception, feeling as if the foundation of my world had shifted. All those years of being told I hadn't measured up to Audrey's standard, and it had been a fabrication all along. Rather than confronting my family immediately, I decided to verify what I'd found. Professor Williams, my father's old friend from law school days, had been close to our family for decades. Now retired, and apparently less concerned with maintaining appearances, he agreed to meet me for coffee at a small cafe across town. "I always wondered if you'd figure it out," he said after I carefully described what I'd discovered without revealing I had actual documents. "Your father was determined that Audrey would follow in his footsteps, even when it became clear she lacked the natural aptitude. So you knew." Professor Williams stirred his coffee slowly. "Many people knew Cassandra. Your father is influential but not subtle. The donations, the pressure on admissions committees, the arrangements with professors to ensure Audrey received the right grades." He looked genuinely sad. "What's curious is that you actually had the academic ability Audrey lacked. Your father could have saved himself a lot of trouble if he'd focused on you instead." My investigation continued with Philip Warner, my father's former colleague who had left their law firm under mysterious circumstances years ago. He now worked at a small practice across the city and seemed almost relieved when I contacted him. "Your father threatened to ruin me if I ever spoke about what I knew," he explained during our meeting. "But that was 15 years ago. I've built a new life since then." He confirmed that my father had systematically used his connections to advance Audrey's education and career, even helping her pass the bar exam when she failed twice on her own. While I was building my case, Audrey made her first attempt to neutralize me. Her call came late one evening, her voice sugar-sweet in a way that had always preceded manipulation. "Cassie, darling, Mom mentioned you've been asking questions about my college days. Is everything okay?" "Just reminiscing," I replied carefully. "Well, you know how family matters should stay private. I'd hate for anyone to get the wrong idea if you're, talking about things you don't fully understand." The threat was velvet-wrapped but unmistakable. The next day, an anonymous text arrived: "Stop digging unless you want to regret it." Meanwhile, I learned from my cousin Rebecca that my parents had been telling relatives I was experiencing mental health issues and creating drama due to professional jealousy of Audrey's success. "I never believed it," Rebecca told me over lunch. "They've always treated you like you were second best. But I might have something that could help you." She revealed that she'd overheard a conversation years ago between my mother and Audrey about fixing some academic problems. Rebecca had thought little of it at the time, but now it took on new significance. My mother's complicity was the first major betrayal that truly wounded me. I had always viewed her as weak-willed but essentially loving, a passive participant in my father's schemes. But when Rebecca showed me emails between my mother and Audrey's undergraduate advisor discussing how to manage Audrey's academic challenges discreetly, I realized Mom had been an active conspirator all along. That night, staring at my ceiling in my childhood bedroom, I made a decision. This wasn't just about setting the record straight anymore. This was about justice for myself and for everyone else who had played by the rules while the Mitchells cheated the system. I would need more evidence, and I would need allies. The battle for truth was just beginning, and I was finally ready to fight. Armed with the evidence of academic fraud, I knew I needed to investigate Audrey's professional life as well. If her education had been fabricated, what about her celebrated legal career? The Mitchell name opened doors at her prestigious law firm Caldwell and Barnes, but I suspected there was more to the story. I arranged a casual chance meeting with Martin Caldwell, the firm's founding partner, at his regular lunch spot, a strategy I'd learned during my years in corporate marketing. After establishing rapport through mutual connections, I carefully steered our conversation toward Audrey. "Your sister has a remarkable track record," Caldwell said, signaling for the check. "Though between us, she's been fortunate to have exceptional support." "Support?" Caldwell hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Let's just say your sister excels at delegation. Some partners handle cases personally. Others know how to leverage junior talent. Audrey has a knack for claiming credit while her associates do the heavy lifting." He smiled tightly. "But that stays between us. Your father and I go way back." Further investigation revealed a pattern. Audrey's celebrated courtroom victories were largely the work of junior associates like Ethan Parker and Sophia Washington, brilliant young attorneys who received minimal recognition while Audrey took the spotlight. Most disturbing were rumors about client funds being mishandled on cases Audrey supervised, issues that mysteriously disappeared after my father made calls to the right people. My research was interrupted by an unexpected visitor to my apartment. James, my brother-in-law, had texted asking to meet somewhere private. When he arrived, he looked haggard, nothing like the polished surgeon who appeared at family functions. "I can't do this anymore," he said, sinking onto my couch. "Living with the lies, pretending everything is perfect. I saw what you did at dinner, and I think you're the only person who might understand." Over the next 2 hours, James revealed the reality of his marriage to Audrey: emotional manipulation, controlling behavior, and a partner who cared more about appearances than actual connection. "She constantly reminds me that without the Mitchell connections, my career would be nowhere," he confessed. "And your father encourages it, telling me how lucky I am to be part of the family." James didn't know specifics about Audrey's professional misconduct, but he provided context that confirmed my suspicions. "She's always working late, supposedly, but when legal questions come up at home, she has to call her associates for answers. It's like she doesn't actually know the law." The next morning, I returned to my apartment from a run to find my door slightly ajar. Inside, my files had been rifled through, and the folder containing Audrey's original test scores was missing. Fortunately, I had already scanned everything and stored copies with my friend Zoe, a cybersecurity specialist, who had helped me create encrypted backups. The invasion of my home crossed a line. This was no longer just about family drama. This was illegal intimidation. I installed security cameras that day and moved my most important documents to a safe deposit box. 3 days later, my presence was requested at the Brookline Country Club for the annual Mitchell family brunch, an event I usually avoided. I arrived to find Audrey holding court among relatives and family friends, but her smile faltered when she saw me. "Everyone, look who finally made time for family," she announced, glass of mimosa raised. "My little sister taking a break from her." "What exactly is it you do again, Cassie?" "Social media." I smiled pleasantly. "Digital marketing strategy. Though lately I've been researching something far more interesting: the relationship between professional ethics and family influence." The tension was palpable as Audrey pulled me aside. "I don't know what game you're playing," she hissed, "but you're embarrassing yourself. Everyone knows you're unstable and jealous of my success. Is that why someone broke into my apartment? Because I'm just unstable and no one should take me seriously?" Her expression flickered briefly with something like guilt before hardening again. "You need help, Cassie. Professional help." The next betrayal came from my father directly. He called and asked to meet at his club, where he offered what he considered a generous proposition. "I'm worried about you, sweetheart," he said, voice dripping with false concern. These stories you're inventing, these accusations, it's not healthy. He slid a check across the table. Take this. It's enough to cover a year at that wellness retreat in Arizona. Get the help you need, and when you're better, we can discuss your return to the family. I left the check on the table. I'm not the one who needs help, Dad. But you might want to prepare yourself. I found something interesting in Grandmother's trust documents. His face paled slightly. What are you talking about? I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. The Mitchell Family Trust, established by Grandmother in 2002. The one that was supposed to be divided equally between Audrey and me. I walked away, leaving him stunned. I had nearly given up several times during my investigation, doubting myself, and wondering if reconciliation would be simpler than truth. But each betrayal strengthened my resolve. The Mitchell facade was cracking, and behind it lay decades of manipulation and fraud that had shaped my entire life. I was no longer fighting just for recognition, I was fighting for justice. The mention of Grandmother's trust had clearly rattled my father, confirming my suspicions that there was something significant to uncover there. Eleanor Mitchell, my father's mother, had been a formidable woman who built a substantial real estate portfolio after my grandfather's early death. She had always treated Audrey and me equally in life, a stark contrast to my parents' blatant favoritism. I made an appointment with Lawrence Thompson at Meridian Financial Services, presenting myself simply as Eleanor Mitchell's granddaughter reviewing family assets. Lawrence was initially hesitant until I showed him my identification and mentioned specific properties I remembered Grandmother discussing. The Mitchell Family Trust is quite complex, Lawrence explained, pulling up detailed financial statements. Your grandmother established it to provide equally for both her granddaughters, while maintaining certain family properties intact. As we reviewed, the document's discrepancies emerged. The original trust stipulated that upon Eleanor's death, her assets would be divided equally between Audrey and me, with provisions for education expenses. Yet subsequent amendments showed most assets redirected to Audrey, with only a token monthly stipend allocated to me. These amendments were made in 2010, Lawrence noted, shortly before your grandmother's health declined significantly. Who authorized these changes, I asked, though I already knew the answer. Your father, Richard Mitchell, as executor and trustee. And there's a co-trustee signature here from Audrey Mitchell. The betrayal cut deep. Grandmother had intended to provide equally for both of us, but my father and sister had manipulated a dying woman's legacy to continue their pattern of favoritism and fraud. The true extent of this betrayal became clear when I calculated the numbers. The trust had been worth approximately $12 million. The amendments ensured Audrey received over $10 million in assets and investments, while I received a modest monthly stipend that totaled less than $500,000 over 10 years. Stealing from family was low even for them. But what made it truly unforgivable was that they had taken advantage of Grandmother's declining mental state to do it. I needed legal confirmation, so I approached Gerald Maxwell, the attorney who had handled my grandmother's estate. Initially, he refused to discuss confidential matters, but when I mentioned potential fraud and elder abuse, his demeanor changed. I had concerns at the time, Maxwell admitted reluctantly. Your grandmother's mental capacity was questionable when those amendments were signed. I documented my reservations, but your father assured me everything was according to Eleanor's wishes. And you believed him? Maxwell looked uncomfortable. Richard Mitchell is a powerful man in Boston legal circles. Challenging him wasn't a realistic option for my practice. After a pause, he added, "But I kept copies of the original trust documents and my notes regarding your grandmother's condition. Attorney-client privilege would normally prevent me from sharing these, but in cases of suspected fraud, he provided me with copies of the original trust and his contemporaneous notes, expressing concern about Eleanor's competence when the amendments were signed. These documents alone could potentially invalidate the changes and force a redistribution of assets. The next morning, I discovered my car had been vandalized in my apartment building's garage. The word Liar was scratched into the hood, and all 4 tires were slashed. No security cameras had captured the incident, but the message was clear: someone was trying to intimidate me into silence. Instead of going to the police where my father's connections could bury the report, I documented everything and added it to my growing file of evidence. 3 days later, I received a text message from my mother. Family emergency meeting tomorrow, 6 p.m. Everyone will be there. Please come. I arrived at my parents' house to find it wasn't just immediate family waiting. Aunts, uncles, and cousins from my father's side filled the living room, along with family friends like the Williamsons and Petersons. My mother looked anxious, my father grimly determined, and Audrey triumphant. This wasn't a family meeting. It was an intervention. "We're all here because we love you, Cassie," my mother began shakily reading from a note card. "We're concerned about your recent behavior and accusations." One by one, relatives spoke about their concerns for my mental health, repeating variations of the same message. I was making things up. I was jealous of Audrey. I needed professional help. It became clear they'd been fed a carefully crafted narrative by my parents and sister. When everyone had spoken, my father stood up the picture of paternal concern. "Sweetheart, we've arranged for you to spend some time at Lakeside Wellness Center. They can help you work through these delusions and anger issues." I remained silent throughout their speeches, observing which relatives seemed genuinely concerned and which were simply playing along with the Mitchell family theater. When my father finished, I opened my bag and removed a folder. "Before I respond to this ambush, disguised as concern, I'd like everyone to look at something." I distributed copies of my grandmother's original trust documents alongside Maxwell's notes about her questionable mental capacity when the amendments were made. Grandmother intended for Audrey and me to be treated equally. Instead, Dad and Audrey redirected over $9 million that should have been split between us. I turned to my stunned relatives. "This isn't about mental health. It's about fraud." My cousin Rebecca stood up. "I can vouch that what Cassie's saying makes sense. Grandma Eleanor always treated them equally. She told me specifically that she wanted both girls to have the same opportunities." The room erupted in shocked murmurs and uncomfortable glances. My father attempted to regain control of the situation, but his voice lacked its usual authority. "These are complex legal matters that Cassandra doesn't fully understand." "I understand them perfectly," I interrupted. "And so will the probate court when they review these documents." That was when my father clutched his chest and staggered. The family meeting dissolved into chaos as someone called 911 and my mother rushed to his side. Even in that moment of crisis, I noticed Audrey's eyes on me, not filled with concern for our father, but with pure, undisguised hatred. As the paramedics wheeled my father out on a stretcher diagnosed with severe angina, but not a heart attack, I realized there was no turning back. The Mitchell family facade had finally cracked open in front of witnesses. Whatever came next would change all our lives forever. While my father recovered at Massachusetts General Hospital, I returned to my investigation now, focusing on my own career history. The pattern of familial sabotage had been so extensive in other areas of my life, I wondered if they had interfered with my professional development as well. 3 years earlier, I had been the lead candidate for promotion to Director of Digital Strategy at Thompson Media Group. Despite exceeding all performance metrics and receiving glowing reviews, the position unexpectedly went to Marcus Wells, an external candidate with less experience. The explanation I received was vague, strategic, fit, and executive decision, but I had accepted it professionally and continued to excel in my role. Now, armed with new perspective, I reviewed emails from that period and noticed something peculiar. The promotion decision coincided with my father's annual golf weekend with Lawrence Thompson, the CEO of our parent company, and no relation to me despite the shared surname. I reached out to my former colleague, Tyler Rodriguez, who had left Thompson Media for a competitor the previous year. Tyler had always been straightforward with me, and after I explained some of what I'd uncovered about my family, he hesitated before sharing something significant. "I didn't tell you this before because I thought it would just hurt you," Tyler said over coffee. "But about a week before the promotion decision, Marcus mentioned that your father had reached out to Lawrence Thompson directly. Apparently, your dad said you weren't ready for the responsibility and that promoting you too quickly would ultimately damage your development. My father deliberately sabotaged my promotion. The betrayal was breathtaking even after everything I'd discovered. There's more, Tyler continued. Remember that major campaign for Vertex Pharmaceuticals that faltered after the strategy presentation was leaked to their competitor? The one you were lead on. I remembered all too well. The leak had cost the agency millions and had temporarily derailed my career trajectory. An internal investigation had never identified the source. I found emails showing that Audrey accessed those files through your company account. Her firm represented the competitor Meridian Biotech, and the timeline matches perfectly with when the strategy was compromised. Tyler had secretly kept copies of the digital evidence which he now transferred to my secure drive. The emails showed Audrey using my credentials, which she must have obtained from my personal computer during a family visit to access confidential client information. I never said anything because, well, it was your sister. I figured it must be some mistake or misunderstanding, Tyler explained apologetically. This revelation led me to systematically review my career history. Patterns emerged, promising opportunities that mysteriously evaporated, client relationships that suddenly cooled, and strategic initiatives that encountered unexpected obstacles, all coinciding with family interactions or my father's business connections. The most damning evidence came from Daniel Parker, my current boss at Thomson Media. After hearing about my father's health episode, he called to check on me. Our conversation gradually shifted to my performance history. You know, Cassie, I've always been puzzled by something, Daniel admitted. Your work has consistently been outstanding, yet whenever your name comes up for advancement, there seem to be external factors that complicate things. When I pressed for details, Daniel revealed that my father had been maintaining regular contact with company leadership, ostensibly to provide context about my capabilities. He presented it as helpful guidance from a concerned parent, but in retrospect it feels more like interference. My father had been systematically undermining my career while publicly criticizing me for not achieving Audrey's level of success that he had manufactured for her while actively sabotaging me. The next betrayal came from an unexpected quarter. During a rare moment alone with my mother at the hospital while my father underwent tests, she broke down in tears. I knew, she whispered, about your promotion, about Audrey using your computer. I knew they were holding you back. And you said nothing. I was stunned by her admission. Your father. He always said it was for your own good. That you weren't ready, that you'd crumble under pressure. She grasped my hand. I knew it wasn't true, but after 35 years of marriage, I didn't know how to stand up to him. She revealed that she had witnessed my father make calls to interfere with my career opportunities multiple times, always framing it as protection rather than sabotage. He did the same with Audrey, but in reverse, calling in favors, pressuring people to advance her even when she wasn't qualified. My mother's tearful confession revealed how comprehensively my father had controlled all our lives. She herself had been systematically diminished over decades, her identity subsumed into the role of Richard Mitchell's supportive wife. That evening, Audrey made her most aggressive move yet. She attempted to access my work email, triggering security alerts I'd established using techniques that would make it appear I was misusing company resources during my leave of absence. The attempt was blocked, and the security team traced it directly to her IP address, creating a documented record of her attempted sabotage. As I sat in my apartment that night, reviewing the mounting evidence of years of manipulation and betrayal, I received an official-looking envelope by courier. Inside was a cease and desist letter from Preston and Winters, one of Boston's most aggressive law firms, threatening legal action for defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress against Mitchell family. The letter was a heavy-handed intimidation tactic, but it revealed something crucial: they were scared. After decades of controlling the narrative and manipulating outcomes, my father and sister were facing something they couldn't control, the truth backed by evidence being methodically brought to light. I nearly called Dr. Lowenstein to discuss next steps, but realized I no longer needed guidance on how to respond. For the first time in my life, I was completely clear about who I was and what justice required. The Mitchell family secrets had festered in darkness long enough. It was time to bring everything into the light. The cease and desist letter represented a critical escalation. My family was moving from private intimidation to legal warfare, betting that I would back down rather than engage in a protracted legal battle against my father's considerable resources and connections. They had miscalculated. I contacted Heather Dawson, a law school friend who had become a respected attorney specializing in financial fraud and estate litigation. After reviewing my evidence, she agreed to represent me. "This isn't just a family dispute," Cassie Heather said during our first official meeting. "Based on what you've shown me, we're looking at potential trust fraud, elder abuse regarding your grandmother, corporate espionage, in the case of your leaked marketing strategy, possible identity theft when Audrey used your credentials, and harassment at minimum for the break-in and car vandalism." "I don't want to destroy my family," I clarified. "I just want the truth acknowledged and the damage addressed." "Noble, but they've already escalated this to legal threats. We need to respond strategically." Heather outlined a multi-pronged approach. "First, we counter their cease and desist with our own letter detailing the evidence we possess. Second, we prepare filings to contest the trust amendments based on your grandmother's questionable capacity. Third, we document the career sabotage and corporate espionage for potential negotiation leverage." While Heather prepared our legal strategy, I continued investigating the financial aspects. Working with a forensic accountant recommended by Heather, we discovered offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands linked to my father. These accounts had received transfers coinciding with major transactions from the Mitchell family trust, suggesting my father had been skimming from the trust before redistributing assets. James proved unexpectedly helpful during this phase. Having moved out of the home he shared with Audrey, he contacted me to offer assistance. "Audrey kept files in our home office that she thought I never accessed," he explained, providing digital copies of documents that revealed further financial irregularities. "She has copies of your father's records going back 15 years. I think they were her insurance policy in case he ever turned against her." These records included details of tax strategies that bordered on evasion and documentation of how my father had leveraged his influence to secure Audrey's position at Caldwell and Barnes, despite mediocre performance reviews during her early years. Audrey, meanwhile, attempted a clumsy frame-up, creating fake social media accounts in my name to send herself threatening messages. When Heather had these investigated digital forensic evidence traced the account's creation to Audrey's home IP address and personal devices. "She's not as clever as she thinks," Heather noted. "This attempted frame-up actually strengthens our case regarding harassment and defamation against her." My father's health issues became more serious following a second episode, resulting in hospitalization for a minor heart attack. While the family focused on his medical care, I received news that my mother had quietly reached out to Heather, expressing willingness to provide a sworn statement about the trust amendments and my grandmother's mental state at the plast. Time they were executed. "Your mother is taking an enormous risk," Heather warned. "Richard could make her life extremely difficult if he discovers her cooperation." "She's making her own choices for once," I replied. "I won't discourage that." As my father recovered, my professional situation evolved unexpectedly. Daniel Parker contacted me about the attempted breach of my work account, which had triggered an internal investigation. The security team traced it definitively to an IP address registered to Audrey Mitchell Clark, Daniel explained. "Given the circumstances and your exemplary record, the board has authorized me to offer you a significant promotion upon your return," Director of Strategic Initiatives reporting directly to me. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family's attempts to undermine me professionally had backfired, resulting in the very advancement they had previously prevented. My father's business associates began distancing themselves as rumors of financial irregularities spread. Lawrence Thompson canceled their monthly golf game for the first time in 15 years. The president of the Brookline Country Club quietly suggested my father might want to take a break from committee responsibilities while addressing personal matters. The wheels of justice were turning, but I felt conflicted about the timing of pursuing legal action while my father recovered from heart problems. Heather assured me we could proceed methodically without causing unnecessary stress. Justice doesn't have to be a wrecking ball, Cassie. It can be a chisel carefully revealing truth without destroying everything in its path. This measured approach was tested when we discovered yet another betrayal, perhaps the most personal. During routine credit monitoring, I found evidence of loans taken out in my name years earlier. Further investigation revealed my parents had used my social security number and personal information to secure these loans when I was in college, using the funds to finance Audrey's lavish wedding and first home purchase. This is identity theft, pure and simple, Heather said bluntly. Regardless of them being your parents. The loans had been repaid, but the violations of trust and law were staggering. Each new discovery reinforced that my family's betrayal wasn't just about favoritism, it was about systematic exploitation and fraud that had affected my entire life trajectory. As we prepared to formally contest the trust amendments and address the financial improprieties, I received an unexpected job offer from a competitor of Thomson Media, with a substantial salary increase and equity options. The timing suggested this might be another of my father's manipulations, an attempt to remove me from Boston and my investigation. They're getting desperate, Heather observed. They've moved from threats to attempted bribery. It means we're close to something they really don't want exposed. She was right. The following day, we received notice that the Mitchell Family Trust had suddenly been reorganized to distribute assets more equitably between Audrey and me. It was a transparent attempt to neutralize our strongest legal claim. Too late, Heather said, reviewing the notification. They can't retroactively fix fraud once it's been discovered. And this action essentially admits there was something improper about the previous arrangement. My path forward was clear. With mounting evidence and strengthening legal position, I was finally poised to address decades of injustice, not through vindictive destruction, but through careful, methodical exposure of the truth. The Mitchell family facade was crumbling, and from its ruins, something more authentic might finally emerge. Massachusetts General Hospital's cardiac care wing became the unlikely setting for the Mitchell family's day of reckoning. My father had been transferred to a private room following his second cardiac episode, stable but under close monitoring. The doctor had permitted limited visitors, emphasizing the need to avoid stress, ironic considering what was about to unfold. I arrived carrying a leather portfolio containing copies of all the evidence I'd gathered. My mother sat by my father's bedside, looking frail and exhausted. Audrey stood by the window, tapping furiously on her phone. James had come separately and positioned himself in the corner, maintaining careful distance from his estranged wife. Cassandra, my father acknowledged weakly. Despite his condition, his eyes still carried that calculating sharpness I'd known all my life. Dad, I took a seat across from my mother. I think it's time we had an honest conversation. Audrey immediately went on the offensive. Is this really the time Dad's recovering from a heart attack, for God's sake? When would be a better time, Audrey? After the next round of gaslighting, after more break-ins at my apartment, after more attempts to access my work accounts, my father's expression shifted, slightly surprised, perhaps, at how much I knew. I opened my portfolio. I'm not here to cause a scene or worsen Dad's condition. I'm here to offer a resolution that could prevent this situation from becoming even more public and damaging than it already is. What situation? My father attempted his courtroom voice, but it lacked its usual authority. The systematic fraud, manipulation, and sabotage that has defined our family for decades. I laid out 3 documents on the rolling hospital tray. These are summaries of what I've discovered with supporting evidence. One concerns the academic fraud that created Audrey's career. One details the Mitchell family trust manipulation, and one outlines the deliberate sabotage of my own career and reputation. The room fell silent as my father glanced at the documents without touching them. I've brought these to offer you a choice, I continued. We can resolve these matters privately with appropriate restitution and acknowledgement of the truth. Or we can let the courts and regulatory bodies address them publicly. Audrey laughed, but it sounded hollow. This is absurd. You have nothing. I have grandmother's original trust documents and medical records showing her cognitive decline when the amendments were made. I have documentation of loan applications made in my name without my knowledge. I have evidence of your access to my work accounts before confidential strategies were leaked. The color drained from Audrey's face. My father rallied slightly. Whatever you think you know, these are complex matters with reasonable explanations. Dad, I interrupted gently, I understand complex matters. I understand that you created a mythology around Audrey's achievements while actively undermining mine. I understand that you diverted grandmother's legacy, which was meant to be shared equally. I understand that you used your influence to advance Audrey's career while sabotaging mine. My mother began to cry softly, and I realized with a pang that despite everything, I still hated seeing her in pain. What exactly do you want? My father asked, his voice quieter now. I want acknowledgement of the truth. I want the trust restored to grandmother's original intentions. I want confirmation that there will be no further interference in my career or personal life. Audrey's composure finally broke. This is all Dad's fault. He was the one who insisted we needed to manage your career because you were too fragile to handle real pressure. He was the one who altered grandmother's trust because he said you'd waste the money. He made me go along with everything. Her instant betrayal of our father didn't surprise me, but the vehemence did. All those years of golden child treatment hadn't created loyalty, just entitlement and self-preservation. That's not true, my father said, struggling to sit up straighter. Audrey, you came to me about Cassie's promotion. You were the one who suggested using your law firm's connection to Thompson's board. The blame shifting might have continued indefinitely if my mother hadn't suddenly stood up. Stop it. Both of you. Her voice was stronger than I'd heard it in years. Richard, we did this. All of it. We favored Audrey from the beginning because she was more like you, or so we thought. We undermined Cassie because she was independent and didn't need us as much, and somehow that threatened you. My father stared at my mother in shock. In 35 years of marriage, I'd never seen her directly contradict him. Elizabeth. No, Richard. I've enabled this for too long. She turned to me. Cassie, I'm so sorry. You deserved better from all of us. In that moment, James stepped forward. I want a divorce, Audrey. I've already filed the paperwork. I can't be part of this family dynamic anymore. Audrey whirled on him. You ungrateful, do you know what my family's connections have done for your career? I'm a good surgeon, James replied quietly. I don't need your family's manipulation to succeed. He nodded at me and left the room. The family structure was collapsing before my eyes, the facade crumbling to reveal the rot beneath. Part of me had expected to feel satisfaction, but instead I felt a complicated mixture of vindication and sadness. My father slumped back against his pillows, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. What happens now? Before I could answer, Audrey made one last, desperate play. If you pursue this, I'll expose everything about Dad's business dealings. The tax evasion, the judicial influence peddling everything. He'll end up in prison. She'd meant it as a threat against me, but her willingness to destroy our father to save herself revealed everything about who she truly was. I shook my head. I've already reported the relevant financial irregularities to the appropriate authorities, Audrey. But I provided evidence only of the issues that directly affected me and grandmother's estate. I left Dad's other business dealings out of it. My father looked at me with something I'd rarely seen, genuine surprise, perhaps even respect. Why would you protect me? He asked. Because destroying you was never my goal. Justice was. There's a difference. Audrey stormed out already on her phone, presumably to her lawyers. My mother wiped her tears, straightened her shoulders, and for the first time in my memory made a decision without looking to my father for approval. I think you two need to talk privately, she said, gathering her purse. I'll be in the cafeteria when you're finished. When the door closed behind her, my father and I were left alone, two adversaries who shared blood but had never truly known each other. "You've become formidable," he said after a long silence. "I always was," I replied. "You just never noticed." The truth, long buried under layers of manipulation and deceit, was finally exposed to the light. Whatever happened next would at least be built on reality rather than illusion, a painful but necessary foundation for whatever remained of the Mitchell family. 6 months passed. Boston's harsh winter had yielded to a promising spring, much like the thaw in my own life following the hospital confrontation. The Mitchell family had been irreversibly transformed, yet somehow we had survived, not as the perfect facade we once presented, but as imperfect, authentic individuals finding our way toward a new normal. My father's recovery had been both physical and surprisingly emotional. After his discharge from the hospital, he began therapy, something he had dismissed as weakness throughout my childhood. At 65, I'm finally learning to recognize my own insecurities, he admitted during one of our now monthly lunches. Projecting impossible standards onto you girls while manipulating outcomes, it was never about your success. It was about my fear of failure. These admissions didn't erase decades of damage, but they opened a door to something I'd never expected, a relationship with my father based on honesty rather than performance. My mother had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation. After 35 years of deferring to my father, she found her voice and independence. She moved temporarily into the guest house on their property, began volunteering at a women's shelter, and enrolled in art classes, a passion she had abandoned in her 20s to become the perfect Mitchell wife. "I should have stood up for you long ago," she told me over coffee in her new studio, surrounded by her surprisingly good watercolors. "But I'm learning it's never too late to do the right thing." The legal consequences had been significant, but measured. My father paid substantial financial penalties for the trust manipulation and identity fraud, but avoided criminal charges due to my limited cooperation with investigators. The Mitchell family trust was properly redistributed according to grandmother's original intentions, with provisions for both Audrey and me to receive equal shares. Audrey had suffered the most concrete professional consequences. The Massachusetts Bar Association launched an ethics investigation following evidence of her misconduct at Caldwell and Barnes. Rather than face potential disbarment, she voluntarily surrendered her law license for a 5-year period. Last I heard, she had moved to Chicago, refusing contact with any of us. James finalized their divorce and remained in Boston, gradually rebuilding his life and maintaining a friendly relationship with me, independent of the Mitchell family drama. My own career had flourished. Upon returning from leave, I accepted the Director of Strategic Initiatives position at Thompson Media, where I now led a team of 20 professionals across 3 offices. Daniel Parker had become a valuable mentor, encouraging me to trust my instincts and abilities without the shadow of familial doubt constantly hovering over me. Perhaps most meaningful was the scholarship fund I established using a portion of my inheritance. The Eleanor Mitchell Foundation for Educational Integrity provided support to students who demonstrated genuine academic merit but lacked financial resources or connections, a direct counterpoint to the privilege-based advancement that had characterized my family's approach. The journey toward healing hadn't been linear. There were still difficult days, uncomfortable family gatherings, and occasional setbacks in trust. Dr. Lowenstein helped me navigate the complex emotions of reconciliation, without erasure, how to move forward without pretending the past never happened. "Your family did wrong by you," she reminded me during a session. "Acknowledging that isn't vindictive, it's honest. Healing doesn't require forgetting." This wisdom guided me as I developed a new understanding of family, one that included the friends who had supported me through the darkest periods. Zoe, who had protected my evidence, Tyler, who had confirmed my suspicions about workplace sabotage, Heather, who had helped me seek justice rather than revenge, and many others who had shown me that chosen family could be as meaningful as blood relations. 6 months after the hospital confrontation, we gathered for a small dinner at my parents' home, the first time we had attempted such an occasion since that fateful night when everything began to unravel. My father, thinner but clearer-eyed, sat at the head of the table. My mother, more animated than I remembered from childhood, served a meal she had cooked herself rather than catered for appearance's sake. As we settled into our seats, my father cleared his throat. "Before we begin, I want to say something." He looked directly at me, his expression unguarded for perhaps the first time in my memory. "Cassie, watching you these past months, your strength, your integrity, your capacity for both justice and mercy has made me realize what extraordinary human beings, both my daughters, are in very different ways." He raised his glass of sparkling water alcohol, now prohibited by his cardiologist. "To Cassandra Mitchell, who taught her old man the true meaning of strength and character. I'm proud of you not for what you've accomplished, though that's remarkable, but for who you are." The words I had waited a lifetime to hear brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Not because I still needed his approval, I had moved beyond that dependency, but because they signaled a genuine shift in our relationship. The truth, painful as it had been, had ultimately set us all free. Later that evening, as I drove home to my recently purchased brownstone in Cambridge, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. The Mitchell family would never be what it once pretended to be: perfect, harmonious, enviable. Instead, we were becoming something far more valuable: real people with acknowledged flaws and authentic connections, doing the hard work of rebuilding relationships on foundations of truth rather than deception. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was something better, a genuine beginning. If you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family who undervalued you, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Was there a moment when you finally said enough like I did? What helped you find the courage? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice and standing in your truth. Remember, sometimes the most painful journeys lead to the most authentic destinations. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the strength to honor your own worth even when those who should see it most clearly have failed to do so.